Systems Online. Greetings, I'm Agielet Valierre, Entertainment Navigator and Virtual Companion. In today's System Scan, a series about mechanics or ideas across gaming, we're going to look at the Fari app as well as Cortex Prime in order to talk about one way that's nice and easy to think about how to do skills and attributes for your setting. This will not be a full tutorial on Cortex Prime or on Fari, though we will get to most of the relevant Fari features during this. There's certainly going to be some things we won't cover. Real quick, what is fari.app? Fari.app, point blank, is a really light VTT that I'm familiar with. It is not a sponsor, but it's very easy to jump in. The binder automatically keeps all of your character sheets without even having an account. It is very nice, no preps, no accounts. Play your game, very easy to share your character sheets with other people, and it's also very easy to jump in the game, and we'll see it more later. Now, what is Cortex Prime? Cortex Prime builds itself as a tool set that allows you to build your own games with a game system focusing on characterization and story development. Two of the settings that are official right now are Hammerheads, which is the crisis response team. So imagine you're a bunch of paramedics and firefighters, tornado response folks. Rather than typical enemies, you're fighting forces of nature or man-made disasters. Additionally, Dragon Prince off of Netflix has an official setting called Tales of Shadia in Cortex Prime system. So for a simple idea of how to do your skills, when I was building settings in Genesis and in things like Big Eye, Small Mouth, I always had a hard time figuring out what exact skills I would need. If you've never built a setting, that may sound weird. Or if you're simply playing a few games here or there, it might be unnecessary. But if you do plan on playing a longer game, there's certain reasons that you may want to include certain skills beyond just whether it could technically come up. And at this juncture, we don't need to know every skill possible, but we do need enough to be informed. When using a customizable system in a custom setting, your player may ask about a skill during creation or later down the road that you didn't prepare for. And that's okay, but you do need a basis to know how broad or how specific a skill should be to be useful, but not too useful. So the actual step one is brainstorm every challenge that might have a die roll in your setting. So perhaps go through a movie in the genre, pay close attention to a book or comic in the genre, something like that, and think of everything that you would actually want to have a die roll. And then that leads into step two, where you're going to eliminate the spaces you don't want to encourage a die roll. So something might generally be a die roll, but for my purposes, we didn't really need social rolls. All of the players in the game that I was making a sheet for were very comfortable with handling social encounters on a social basis. You may like social roles, so you could include them. The idea is to include the things you want to encourage a die roll for, because as soon as something is on a player's sheet, they're going to see it as a button they can press. In fact, they'll often feel constrained by it, which is why I encourage people to only have characters within Fari have skills on their sheet that they have, so it's very obvious that they can do things that are not on their sheet. Now, what do I mean by a trap option? A trap option is something that a player could invest in that is not going to bear out at the table. For instance, let's say your system has a swim skill, but there's not going to be any opportunity to swim. It's not going to be in their hands whether swimming comes up or not. There just won't be a body of water in which to swim. Or your character can swim, but it'll have no impact. That would be a trap option. They invested in it. They thought maybe this could be something they could help define their character, but it never comes up. And that's a trap. Now, that's a very extreme trap, saying it would never come up, but it would include things that very rarely come up. If you can't really build any part of your identity around it within the current campaign, then I would consider it a trap option. Now, everything that you do think would be fair to have a die roll and does have a chance of coming up, you want to group together based on common sense and rough relative frequency. This will further prune your trap options and allows things that may come up to be grouped together in such a way that an identity could be built around them collectively. The setting my friends and I were going to play in was your archetypical supernatural Victorian England type feel. There are horrors in the world, very similar to like the Man of Letters, Men in Black type idea, where we were the folks who were going to look into the strange mysteries that were happening across the greater London area. So here you can see that we had two different skill groups, the supernatural studies and the natural studies, and that was just to help think about them. So you can see something like animal care and veterinary medicine. Now, in another setting, that might just be animal handling and veterinary medicine might just be a part of medicine. Putting them together here groups them how they thematically would work as a character. Now, some people certainly might know a lot about caring for animals, but very little about veterinary medicine. But a character in a game who knows one is probably going to feel like they should know the other. I mean, have you ever been at a table and you ask the DM, wait, shouldn't I know something about that? I know this. And they're like, well, it is two separate skills. Or maybe they do let you do it, but you kind of feel like maybe if you have to say that a lot, that you're taking advantage of the situation. I suggest thinking of the skills as what type of character would have these, and are they really big enough separately? I know in a lot of games, animal handling type skills don't come up at all, so grouping you with veterinary medicine would mean that somebody has enough to build their identity around, and it can come up enough. And also, when I GM, I know I like to look at the available skills and the skills that my players have so that I can build encounters around those. Now, in actual play, will they utilize the skill that was my intention? Not necessarily, but it does give people who have been waiting to use that skill an opportunity, and it'll drive a different thematic approach to how I built the encounter and created it in the first place. So it's sort of like a creation prompt. And now I'd like to go into attribute theory. So in D&D and games like Pathfinder and a lot of video games have taken their cue from Dungeons and Dragons and use strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. And a lot of creators will lean onto that as though it is the only way to do it, as though everything perfectly cleanly fits into those 6 boxes, and that's just the right way to do it. Every system isn't going to be the same. In some systems, there is no big difference between the strength of individual characters. They're all about the same strong. Are your characters really actually going to be able to define themselves by strength, by constitution, by charisma? It's important when you're making your own setting that you question this at the beginning so everything ties together well from there. In Tales of Xadia, they use devotion, glory, justice, liberty, mastery, and truth. So when your character makes a roll, it's either for the purpose of devotion, for glory, for justice, for liberty, for master, or for truth. Their personal attunement to those virtues and ideals is what will drive them in the story, because that's how Dragon Prince works. Somebody's physical strength in a scene is often much less important to the ideal that they're chasing. Legends of the Five Rings uses a more abstract version of these ideas, with fire, water, air, earth, and void being philosophical approaches. It may help you to look at other systems and see what they did and ask yourself, what is the actual way that the player characters are interacting with this world? Maybe that will be correct, maybe that will be sufficient, but maybe it won't be. We had the values of devotion, justice, kindness, passions, patience, and truth. For vices, we went with apathy, envy, gluttony, lust, pride, and wrath. You might notice greed isn't there. Well, we wanted to keep them all at 6, and envy and greed were the easiest to roll into for our purposes. Another group might have simply kept all 7 and not wanted 6, 6, and 6. Another group may have thought that maybe gluttony and lust were easier to go together, or greed and pride. But this was what made sense for us. And for traits, we went with awareness, courage, faith, guile, reason, and vitality. So your values are what you place the most stock into on your executive level, while your traits were the way that you more were internally. So when your values and your traits were in alignment, as in your best value and your best trait were being used on something, you were very, very good. Well, if something was in line with your values, but you weren't that great at it, you still would be pretty good. Or if you were good at something, whether or not you valued it, you would still be pretty good. But you were working your best when your values and your traits were in alignment, and you were at your worst when you needed to use a value you didn't care so much for and a trait you were not so great with. Now, what did that mean? The basic die pool then was value plus trait. And when a skill applied, we added it. When a distinction applied, we added it. When an equipment applied, we added it. And the idea was a value and a trait should always work for an active role. Skills would often, but not always, work. We actually had a general skill that was the catch-all. Putting a general skill to D4 meant they always had a D4 in the pool, and you could always see general on your sheet. So if you were looking at your sheet for what buttons you can press, you had one on there that said all else. A nice little reminder that you could do things that not present. Now, vice was used to substitute for a value or trait for some mental defense roles. Sometimes your apathy, your envy, or your gluttony is going to keep you from doing something against those traits. It also could be added to the pool for a corruption point. This was an idea taken from the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, where the dark side was something you tapped into to enhance your power and it affected you over time. The final result, which was not solely my work, looked like this. We had our values, our vices, our traits, our skills, and you only listed the skills that you had to keep your sheet nice and clean and small. And your equipment, we each got 2 items, and then you had your stun. Your overall health was your vitality plus passion, and then it was either a D4 or D8 depending on your distinctions. If you had a distinction that would give you more vitality, if you had a distinction that made sense that you would get more health, you would get the D8, and if you did not, you got a D4. This is a little bit messy because this corruption was based on apathy, and my apathy was a D10 for this, and this is my sheet, but I set these all back to 6, other than the general skill and vitality. And now we reach part 2. We should make our own setting. What should we make it off of? Well, what's the title say? Oh, right, it says Sk8 the Infinity. If you're like me, when you watched Sk8 the Infinity, you wondered how you could get in on that sweet action at the tabletop. So let's go over how we might think of something like that doesn't have enemies in the traditional way, doesn't have a similar action loop. How can we do that in Cortex Prime? All right, so speed is important with skateboarding. Perhaps we might also have a daring attribute for how fast you're willing to dare to go. For balance, maybe that would be composure. You're keeping your cool, keeping your balance, and keeping your balance both might be important. Reflexes, perhaps that'd be your wits, how well you were able to take in information and respond to it. Style, perhaps a moxie type skill. For sabotage, maybe we'd be looking at guile. And for recovery, that could mean helping somebody recover, recovering during a trick, recovering after being hurt. Let's keep thinking, You could also distinguish yourself with equipment repair. And perhaps we're gonna extend out a little bit, right? We're gonna do a little bit of things they didn't do in the show, but they might have, such as videography, photography. We can imagine a character whose main thing is taking pictures and videos, getting them online and stuff like that, getting the brand out there. Perhaps like Longa, your character is really good at another extreme sport. Maybe event organization. So you're not just the characters who are participating, you're the characters who are creating these events. We can't downplay crowd riling and fan service, right? That's how they built their brand. And then we have teamwork and cooperation. That could be important in our setting as well, depending on how we want to frame our competitions. Still not quite enough though. We need a little bit more because we're probably going to play this with 3 to 5 other people. And so let's keep thinking. What about non-sport related skills like calligraphy, cooking, computer science, bartering, knowledge of the skating world, mentorship, first aid? These are all things that maybe could be important too. They could certainly come up in our game and we can imagine there could be roles for them. So what do we want to do? Let's think, let's put this together. All right, so let's say that our competencies are going to be speed, balance, style, sabotage, and recovery. For our attributes, we'll go with daring, composure, wits, and fellowship. And skills would be as desired. Most of it is revolved around skating, and most of your skating is going to be competencies, attributes, and distinctions. They probably can have a lot of skills that are just extra features and fluff or downtime activities because that's going to be the main place where they're really showing who they are individually. During a competition, then, we might imagine competency plus attribute plus distinction. While between competitions, we might use attribute plus skill plus distinction. That would mean for any given role, your players are going to be rolling 2 to 3 dice. Now, 2 dice is going to require a mod for Cortex Prime, but it's not a difficult mod to understand. It just becomes a basic DC mod because you don't need rolling damage so much. When you open up Fari, this is the screen you're going to see. You're going to want to go into My Binder, and you're going to want to press Characters. We're going to press New. All right, so we need a template, and so the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to go into Templates. We will scroll down to Cortex, and we want Cortex Kitchen Sink. You can see they already have Shadia there. So we want to load this template. This gives us a bunch of defaults for Cortex Prime. Now we're going to go in wide to make the screen look a little nicer. And we're going to go in advanced because you have to go into advanced in order to edit. Distinctions are one of the cruxes of Cortex Prime, so we're going to keep that. Distinctions are very similar to the types of tags you might have used in the Fate Plus system or in something like City of Mist. It is a descriptor that is going to activate when it is appropriate. So if you were playing Daredevil and you used Man Without Fear, every time there was something that being brave would affect you, you would get to add that D8 to your pool. And we will show pools a little bit in a moment. Now, we are not going to need quite a few of these things. We aren't going to need, we do not need, we'll keep those. Our purposes here, we're going to get rid of the trait set with attached stress. Though, as you get more familiar with Cortex Prime, you may want to use the system as the stress mechanic may actually be really nice for Sk8 the Infinity, though for our purpose, we're going to have one streamlined source of stress, so we don't need it as a separate mechanic. We're going to get rid of resources for now. We'll keep plot points because those are important. We will keep skills. We're going to actually want 2 of these. We're going to get rid of power set for Fae, because there aren't really Fae in Sk8 the Infinity. And we're going to get rid of trait set with SFX. We have all these. We're going to mess with this in a second. All right, so we want to name this. We're going to name this section as our competencies. And then we are going to copy this section and we are going to paste another one there. Oops. Hold on. Okay, so we want to copy this section's blocks. Oh my God, stop. Okay, so we want to copy this section's blocks, and then we are going to add a section. And that gives us a new header, and then we're going to paste our blocks. And in this one is going to be our attributes. So now we have our competencies and our attributes and our skills and our distinctions. And those are the things that we said we would need. Now to balance out, let's go ahead and put this section on. Where did you go? Oh, oops, it was supposed to go down. We're gonna move our plot points over here. Let's paste our blocks and get rid of this one over here. Okay, so now we just need to change the names of our competencies. Speed. Of course, once again, as you playtest, you may find you need the 6th one or not. But for our attributes, we are going to, by the way, you can change these links and these display names, but for now I don't really have anything to put there. And for our attributes, we're saying daring or this one. And for skills, personally, I would limit these. I would start deleting these off that you don't need. These are more of a set skill that's on its basics. I would do more freeform skills. It's a custom game. I don't really know that everyone needs to have these set things. I mean, fight and fly are very unlikely to come up in your setting, but you can trim that with the skills. Have your players enter in the skills that they need and just delete out every block they don't need. So now how do they modify? Well, we're here. Let's say that their speed should be the D8. You click step up. If their speed should be the D6, you press step down. The double arrows going left and right. Okay, so, but let's say that these defaults are fine. You go back up, you take off advanced, and to build their pool, let's say distinction 1 is that you are young gun distinction. So it's about being daring and things like that. You're going to right click to add it to the pool. And you're using your speed, you're going to right click to add that to the pool. See how now they're both lit up. You'll right click on daring, and now those are all in your pool. And you're going to click on oops, right click, right click, right click. And then you want to click on roll, not the circle. You want to click on the roll 3. And in this case, we're not using a skill, but we could. So it says that we got a 1, a 5, and a 4. So to overcome the DC, we're going to probably pick our 4 and our 5 to make 9. In the other game, our D8 was our lowest, which is nice because that would be our power. So we'd have a power of 8 with a 9 to overcome the DC, because power is always the top of the die. So the 8, the highest number it can be, is an 8, so it would count as an 8. And so we might have to use it if we need it to overcome the DC, but we'd love for it to be our power. But otherwise, you can just pick 2 to overcome the DC, and it stays very simple that way. When making your sheet, I recommend that the first thing you do is simply put default or template as the name of the character, so that when you save it, it's going to save that way, and then you would make a copy of it and make your character just in case you need to go back or share with somebody else. When you download, it'll be in the JSON format, and that's what the export is. Export as template is not a feature I'm very good at yet, but what I would also like to show you, and print would be if you want it to be in PDF form. When you're back on this screen, you can press start playing now. The nice thing about Fari is the first person in is counted as the game master, and there is a copy section link, and they have a status. So if you're waiting, or if you've already played this round, you can put that so that the GM has an easy way to see it. Everybody in the session link, you'll be able to see their mouse in a different color, which is very cool. So you can see that everyone's there. The GM can utilize this space to draw if they need to explain something better. They can add a sticky note to different places. They can define out the scenes. You can pre-make those scenes in your own binder as well. And the scene will change the name on the tab, which is kind of cool. And so yeah, so let's go ahead. We're going to add an NPC because we're only the GM right now. We're going to assign them our character sheet, our template. And then maybe they're going to craft something with their style. They're going to craft something cool. Once again, we wouldn't use craft probably, as it's... Oh, hold on. So let's say that we want to craft something. So that's skill and attribute. So we're going to craft it with our wits probably. And our distinction 2 is that we're a really good mechanic. And we roll here, and it comes up like this, and everyone would be able to see it. Additionally, you can go yay if you're the GM, or sad confetti, boo. And it also has this lovely thing that is the pause button. The pause button says, everyone wait a minute, take a second to talk things through and rewind the game if necessary to make sure everyone is on the same page. Once everyone is ready, the GM can unpause and the game continue. The GM is the only one who can pause, and anyone can pause. The GM is the only one who can unpause. So anyone who needs everything to stop can just press this. No one can make any more rolls. The drawing will not continue. The scene will not change. It's a very good, like the stoplight cards that people will use. It's built into Fari. And one more thing to show real quick is Fari's story dice. You can roll them all, and you can generate a little story based on these abstract pictures. All right, let's go back. So now that we've mapped this onto Fari, let's see, what have we done? Have we accomplished our goal? Can we simulate the action of Sk8 the Infinity? I believe we can. It would need testing, but I think you can competently simulate the action of Sk8 the Infinity with the die rolls. Can we simulate the world between the action? I believe you can. With your skills and attributes, you can do the world between the action decently well. Now, does our idea offer a wide variety of scenarios that feel different? Maybe. How can we do more to ensure that each scenario will feel different enough? The GM can design tracks and obstacles with a focus on decision making. So in a regular game, it might be picking the best attack, but here it's picking the best course. So what do I mean by designing a track or course that is on decision making? So for this, it may look convoluted, but each player is actually only going to make 4 to 8 rolls depending on whether or not somebody sabotages. At the beginning, everyone is together, and at most they're going to be spread between 3 zones. So this gives an ebb and flow of congestion and opportunities for sabotage. It's totally possible you could take the leftmost path and be on your own for a little while, but it will converge down. And if you're playing in person, this could even be laid out as cards that get flipped over, maybe in a way that hints at the obstacles in the distance. On one side, you write the whole thing out, the decisions, the DCs if you want to, and on the other side, you just give a hint. And you can reuse cards because the order of those cards will make things different and how many people were present. Maybe when you first went onto 5F, you were able to take the safe route. But the next time you're at 5F, somebody has sabotaged the safe route, and now you have to either forward the sabotage or go the other way. I call this a sample second course because I do think the first course should probably be more straightforward so everyone can get an idea of the rules and options. But you do want to start adding in some complexity sooner rather than later because sabotage might seem more difficult if things stay too simple for too long. Additional sports can have more prominence, and competitions could include decathlon type events. This would increase teamwork, increase the amount of skills you might need. You could even have a whole different attribute table that is based on different sports that balance against each other as well. So how much your character skateboards, snowboards, extreme bicycle. This would make your game almost more like Rocket Power or the video game Steep. But that's okay. You would still get a lot of the same feeling out of that as you could get in Sk8 the Infinity. That's a choice that's up to you and your team. Additionally, you could use things like relays to have teamwork. Mystery, business development, brand recognition, and other elements can be added without a need for rigid mechanics. You don't need to roll for those things necessarily, or they can flow from skills you already have. You could creatively use things like scavenger hunts, capture the flag, and other events to vary up the encounters. Imagine that instead of just skateboarding, they're skateboarding while playing paintball, something you should probably never do in real life, but you certainly could do in a game, and it would test their skills differently. And finally, you could have a focus on interpersonal relationships. That's really the heart of the show, and probably if your friends want to do a Sk8 the Infinity specific campaign, interpersonal relationships is probably one of the main drivers for that. I would suggest in this case, each character comes up with sort of a lock on their heart, and their main thing is to figure out narratively what is actually unlocking that heart. Or in the Ace Attorney way, think about multiple locks on their heart. And so over time, they're going to be unlocking them slowly, and maybe the idea would even be that different characters need to help them unlock different ones. So it's not just your relationship with one character, but your relationship with everyone in the group that will unlock different parts of your heart. And then once you have all reached fulfillment, then the campaign is ended. Thanks for listening. I hope this helped you in some way, either in creating your own setting or being able to just jump into Sk8 the Infinity. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you enjoyed. For now, systems offline.